بسم الله والحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Welcome, brothers and sisters. It's a pleasure to see you all. And Jazakumullahu khairan for the invitation here to Sweden. This is my first visit to Sweden. And I haven't seen much of Sweden yet, but it's been a positive experience so far. And before I start, mashallah, I'm very impressed with the strong ability that the Swedes have when it comes to the English language. And they seem to speak English as though they're speaking a first language, mashallah. So that was nice to see. And obviously it makes communication easier for me as well. When I'm traveling, it makes life a lot easier for me. Tayyib, inshallah, we are in the next 40 or so minutes. We're going to look at just a few points that relate to the month of Ramadan that I hope you can go away and act upon and take something away with you when you leave today, inshaAllah ta'ala. And it's really important that there is that sort of mental preparation for the month of Ramadan. Because Ramadan comes once a year. It's not something that is constantly around. And that means that when it does come around, it's important that we take advantage of this occasion. And alhamdulillah, Ramadan doesn't come every month. Because if Ramadan was around every month, we wouldn't appreciate Ramadan and we wouldn't realize its importance. But because it's something that we are waiting for every year, a few months before Ramadan, we're awaiting Ramadan. We're talking, oh, Allahu Akbar, 3 months left, oh, 2 months left, 1 month left, 1 week left. So we're constantly in that waiting mode. That gives Ramadan that extra importance, which otherwise it wouldn't have had. And so it's important that we make this month worthwhile. All of us have known people who have passed away, maybe this year, maybe recently, maybe last year. And age is not a helpful guideline because death comes at any time. And so therefore it's worth taking advantage of our opportunities whilst we have them. Is my English clear? Alhamdulillah. Just checking. Of course, I don't have a very strong, we call it Brummie accent. A Brummie accent is an accent that is from Birmingham. A Brummie accent can be difficult to understand. So luckily I don't have a very strong Brummie accent, which means that inshallah you'll be okay understanding what I'm saying. The Prophet ﷺ, during the month of Ramadan, focused on studying the Quran with Jibreel. So Jibreel and the Messenger ﷺ would study the Quran every Ramadan. And take this away. The Prophet ﷺ, all his teachings and all his sunnah is a manifestation of the Quran. It's a practical implementation of the Quran. They go hand in hand. The Quran and the teachings of the Messenger ﷺ go hand in hand. You will find any statement and any action made by the Prophet ﷺ, you will find that there is a root for it in the Quran. There's a root for it in the Quran. And this is why it's reported from some of the Imams, like Shafi'i rahimahullah and others, who said, any hadith, there is a sound hadith, I will find you its origin in the Quran. That shows that the connection between the Quran and the practice of the Prophet ﷺ is like this. So when we learn that something is a sunnah or something is from the Messenger, we should immediately know that it's part of the Quran. It's a continuation of the Quran. It's a tafsir of the Quran. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah says, السنة إنما تفسر القرآن وتبينه. The Sunnah is only a tafsir of the Quran. Yeah? What does that mean? Good. The Sunnah is only something which explains the Quran. It clarifies the Quran. The Quran might give a general statement, a general verse, and the Messenger ﷺ's actions or words further clarify, further extend. So when the Prophet ﷺ focuses on studying the Quran with Jibreel, that's because Ramadan is the month of the Quran. And Allah tells us that Ramadan is the month of the Quran. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. The month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed. The month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed. And the Prophet ﷺ would revise the Quran with Jibreel once. Meaning, he would read the whole Quran from cover to cover, from Al-Fatiha to An-Nas, once. In the last year of his life, before he passed away, he studied the Quran with Jibreel how many times? Twice. That's an important thing to note. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't reading the Quran over and over and over again without paying attention to what he's reciting. He recited it once. And that was enough. And of course his prayers, and he would recite Quran in his prayers as well. But that shows that when it comes to studying the Quran, what's more important is interacting with the Quran. Interacting with it. Not doing it just for barakah. Or not doing it just for numbers. Oh, mashallah, this Ramadan I read the whole Quran 3 times. And mashallah, this Ramadan I read the Quran 5 times. This Ramadan I read the Quran 8 times. But what's the relationship that there is with the Quran? What's the impact that the Quran has on us? And that's why in the hadith, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum reported that the Prophet ﷺ كَانَ يُدَارِسُهُ الْقُرْآنِ. He would study the Quran with him, not just read it, not just recite it. And that's really something that I want all of us to try to act upon this Ramadan. Don't worry about numbers. Don't worry about numbers. Numbers is not important. Allah Ta'ala doesn't accept based on numbers. Allah accepts based on quality and based on ikhlas. What's ikhlas? That's a question to you. Sincerity, which means that an action is done with a sound intention, with a sound purpose. Yeah, a pure intention, a pure purpose. Allah holds to account and Allah rewards based on that, not based on numbers. Not based on numbers. So we need to move away from doing things robotically. Doing things robotically. If we do something so much, it becomes second nature. It becomes second nature. MashaAllah, they're having a party in the back. It becomes second nature. So you end up doing it without thinking that you're doing it. And that's why sometimes we feel we've prayed a whole salah, Dhuhr for example, and we don't realize that we've prayed until the end. Why? Because we're used to Allahu Akbar. We're used to saying Subhanakallah wa bihamdika tabarak ismuka wa ta'ala jadduka wa la ilaha ghayruh. We're used to saying Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Fatiha. We're used to the same 2 surah, Al-Asr, Qul huwallahu ahad, or maybe some other variations of short surah, 3 verses, 2 verses, 1 verse if you're really lazy, 1 verse. We're used to the same routine. So we pray, we leave the prayer, we pray the next prayer, we leave the prayer, and the impact is very little. The impact is little. Because we're doing things out of routine. We're doing things as a ada, as a custom, as opposed to doing it as a ibadah, as an act of worship, where we are conscious of what we're doing. We're focused on what we're doing. We're aware of what we're doing. That's what we want to do. The same applies to reciting the Quran. All of us should spend a portion of the day with the Quran, with the Book of Allah, reading a portion of it. Everyone according to what they're capable of doing. But try to understand, try to interact with the Quran. Try to appreciate what's being said. Try to be conscious and be aware that Allah Ta'ala is addressing us. This Quran is not for the Prophet ﷺ. We know that, yeah? The Quran is for us. The Quran is for us exactly the same way it is for Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali and Abu Hurairah and Aisha and Muawiyah. The Quran is for us just like it is for them, without difference. And so therefore we want that interaction. If you have to use a translation, an English translation, a Swedish translation, that's fine. That's fine. Use the translation, and that will inshallah help this process of feeling that, you know what, the Quran is benefiting me. What did you want to say? I'm not going to say this is enough or that's enough. It goes back to the person. How much they can understand, how much they can recite, how much they can comprehend. If you have some additional motivation, that's fine. Spend more time. If you have a bit less motivation, then take a break. Everything goes back to the person. But the point is, we want to build a connection with the meanings of the Quran. The meanings of the Quran are amazing, by the way. Really. The meanings of the Quran are amazing. Sometimes we feel like there is so much. Islam has so much to it. There's so much to learn. There's so many things being said. Everyone's talking about Islam. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a statement. So it can be difficult to know where to start. Guess what? If something is mentioned in the Quran, then it's more important than something not mentioned in the Quran. So when we are learning through the Quran, we are learning what's most important, and we're learning what's most necessary. It's the word of Allah. It's the word of Allah Ta'ala. And therefore, you're not going to find a better word than the word of Allah. As well as that, when it comes to, are we clear so far, or is something unclear? If something's unclear, raise your hand and ask me to repeat. And I have no problem repeating, inshallah. The second thing is, the Prophet ﷺ's worship during Ramadan wasn't, as we said, a mechanical, robotic type of worship. And it also wasn't a type of worship that is mathematical, counting. Sometimes we do that. We exaggerate counting good deeds. Counting. Counting good deeds is not the biggest reason for doing an act of worship. I'm not doing an act of worship because somebody has told me I will receive 8,325,704 rewards. Why do I need to know that detail? Does Allah Ta'ala reward like that? Mathematics? Read the Quran. If you read one page, you'll have this many reward multiplied by that, and gives us a whole maths working. That's not the way we should look at it. Some people might do that in order to give an idea of the great reward, which is understandable. You can understand that. But we shouldn't look at actions like that. Actions is not like that. Allah rewards according to quality anyway, and according to ikhlas. We've just said that. So that means two people can read one page, the same page, and they will be very, very different in their reward. Is that true or not? Two people can read the same page of the Quran, and their reward is very different. Isn't that correct? So that means that reward is not about counting numbers. Reward is about doing things properly. And when Allah Ta'ala talks about fasting, the main verses that talk about Ramadan and fasting are found in which surah? Surah Al-Baqarah. How many verses are they? Don't guess. Close guess. How many verses are they? They come together. the verses of fasting come together. 5 verses. 5 verses that come together. It starts with Allah Ta'ala's statement, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, kutiba alaykum as-siyam. O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed upon you, as it has been upon those who came before you. Kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum. Because the Jews and the Christians also fast. Jews and the Christians also have a concept of fasting. The Christians are more liberal with their fasting, so they consider fasting to be maybe an optional nafil. They don't really have, or most Christians at least don't really have an obligatory fasting. But fasting was something that existed with the previous nations also. What did he say at the end of the verse? كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Taqwa. So that you can obtain taqwa. Right at the end, Allah Ta'ala says in the last verse, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ رَفَثُ إِلَىٰ نِسَائِكُمْ. Then at the end of the verse he says, كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ آيَاتِهِ لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. Thus Allah shows His signs to the people so that they may attain taqwa. He started it with taqwa and ends it with taqwa. Taqwa is one of those words that is repeated so much that we sometimes don't appreciate the importance of this concept. Every Friday we hear about taqwa. Every Friday. The Khatib, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatih, Ya ayyuhan nasu taqu rabbakum alladhi. And some of us just wait maybe for that part to finish. That's just the beginning for the barakah, blessings. It has no meaning. Just wait for that to finish and then let's listen to the real khutbah. This is part of the khutbah. This is one of the pillars of the khutbah. And according to many scholars, the khutbah is not valid without these verses. Or at least one of those verses. Because taqwa is an important concept. Taqwa, how do people translate taqwa a lot of the time? In Swedish, how do you translate taqwa? Huh? Say taqwa. It's become a Swedish word. Huh? If somebody is a Swedish speaker is going to translate taqwa, what would he say? Huh? And how do you translate that into English? Fear of God. Okay. Fear of God. Does anyone have a different translation? So taqwa, fear of God. Do we have any other translations? Protecting yourself from Allah's punishment. Okay. Awareness of God. God consciousness. Awareness of God and consciousness of God are much more encompassing translations. Particularly because the word fear only gives a partial meaning. The word fear, when we think of fear of God, what do we imagine? Imagine somebody scared. You know that fear? Somebody's scared. But taqwa isn't that. Taqwa isn't that. Taqwa is awareness of God that could include fear of God, hope in Allah, seeking Allah's mercy, seeking Allah's forgiveness, gratitude towards Allah. I do something because I'm grateful to Allah. Is that an example of taqwa? Yes, it is. Because I'm doing something because Allah is in my mind. Could be in my mind for any reason. I'm grateful that Allah Ta'ala has given me this, and therefore I'm going to use it in the correct way. I'm grateful Allah has given me wealth, therefore I'm going to make sure I don't use it in a way that's wrong. That's a form of taqwa. That's a form of taqwa. I forgive someone and I don't respond and I don't retaliate and I show them some mercy and forgiveness because I want Allah to forgive me, my sins as well. That's a form of taqwa. Taqwa just means that we're constantly aware of Allah. Fear of God, in my view, is a deficient translation. Fear is a deficient translation of taqwa. Taqwa is an awareness of Allah Ta'ala. Being conscious of Allah Ta'ala in the things that we do. This is a really, really important concept. And this is why there's so much emphasis on the heart and on taqwa. Because there's no point going on about actions external actions, when there's no internal change. When there is a strong internal change, we will find that we can force ourselves to do good things. We can force ourselves. Some people who have no taqwa, if someone doesn't have taqwa, can they do good things? Of course they can. If someone doesn't have taqwa, can they give to charity? Yes or no? Of course they can. Some people who don't believe in God, give to charity. If somebody who doesn't believe in God, who doesn't have taqwa, isn't aware of God, can that person forgive another person? Yes, they can. So externally, good things can be done. Externally, good things can be done. But no person can be more sincere in their action than the one who's fully aware of God. Because the one who is fully aware of God will do that thing no matter what. And will keep away from what's wrong no matter what. You might find a nice person, a very kind person, very generous and very kind, very good individual. But they might take something that's not theirs if they know that nobody's watching, or they know that they're not going to get in trouble. Why? Because maybe they feel that they're in need. Yeah, I need that thing. The one who has taqwa, on the other hand, he will stop himself from doing so, regardless of the situation, regardless of the circumstance. Taqwa is a more powerful push to do good. It's true, anyone can do good. Anyone can do good outwardly. But taqwa ensures that someone has a strong ability to do good and a strong ability to abstain from wrong. And that's what Ramadan is there for. Ramadan, we're keeping away from things that are halal or haram. In Ramadan, do we keep away from things that are halal or haram? Halal. Keep away from things that are halal. Because food is halal, drink is halal, and relations are halal. All of them are halal. But during the day of Ramadan, and of course haram as well, but I wanted to focus on these things. During the day of Ramadan, we keep away from things that are halal, pure, tayyib, good. Yeah, Allah has described these things as good. كُلُوا مِمَّا فِي الْأَرْضِ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا. Pure, good things. During the day of Ramadan, we keep away from even that. So if we are capable of keeping away from things that are halal for a whole day, for a whole month, then the objective here is to instill within us a discipline and a self-control and an ability to keep away from things that are even haram. Because if we are able to keep away from halal, then there is even more of a reason to keep away from things that are haram. That's the objective. That's the objective. But the problem is, we won't obtain that benefit, and we won't develop ourselves, and we won't discipline ourselves unless we have that in the back of our minds when we're fasting. This is in our minds when fasting. And this is why the Messenger ﷺ says, مَنْ لَمْ يَدَعْ قَوْلَ الزُّورِ وَالْعَمَلَ بِهِ فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ فِي أَنْ يَدَعَ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ. Whoever doesn't leave evil speech, قَوْلَ الزُّورِ, and acting upon it, acting upon evil, then Allah doesn't need you to leave your food and your drink. Allah doesn't need that from you. Allah doesn't need our fasting anyway. But what's this hadith trying to say? It's trying to say that if we are just fasting outwardly, without fasting inwardly, and without thinking of the objective of fasting, then we're not going to benefit from fasting. We're just making ourselves hungry. Just making ourselves hungry. طيب. Are we clear so far? Alhamdulillah. So we've spoken briefly about the Quran, briefly about taqwa, briefly about when it comes to rewards, we try not to be mathematical, but we try to do things properly. And this is why in a hadith reported by Nasa'i and others, Prophet ﷺ said, سَبَقَ دِرْهَمٌ مِئَةَ أَلْفِ دِرْهَمْ. 1 dirham £1, for example, has beaten 100,000 dirham. So the one who has given 1 dirham has beaten the one who's given 100,000 dirham. Meaning, it is possible for the one who gives this much to be rewarded and to be much closer to Allah Ta'ala than the one who gives 100,000 times more. This shows that Allah Ta'ala doesn't reward based on quantity and amount. Allah Ta'ala wants from us ikhlas and quality of action. Ikhlas and quality of action. And every time we do good, every time we do something compulsory, that brings us, and we do it properly, it should bring us closer to Allah Ta'ala. And the closer we are to Allah Ta'ala, the more our lives are directed and guided by Allah. Really. Sometimes when we're in need, we make dua. We make dua. When we need something, we make dua for that thing. What's better than even dua? What's better than making dua is to do what Allah Ta'ala loves and what Allah Ta'ala wants us to do. It's better. It is better than making dua. Whilst continuing to make dua as well, of course. And that's why Allah Ta'ala says, as the Prophet ﷺ told us, وَمَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُهُ عَلَيْهِ. There is nothing that my servant can come closer to me than that which I have made obligatory upon him. مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُهُ عَلَيْهِ. I've made it fard upon him. So those things that I've made fard upon my servant, when he or when she does those things, that's the best thing that a Muslim can do to come closer to me, to come closer to Allah. وَلَا يَزَالُ عَبْدِي يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّوَافِلِ. And my servant continues to come closer and closer to me with additional acts of worship. حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ. Until he becomes beloved to me. فإذا أحببته كنت سمعه الذي يسمع به وبصره الذي يبصر به ويده التي يبطش بها ورجله التي يمشي بها. Until I become my servant's eyes with which he sees with, and I become his ears with which he hears with, and I become his feet with which he walks with. This is Allah saying this. What does that mean? That means our every step in life is guided. Our every step in life is guided towards what's better for us, what's more beneficial for us. That's the key objective behind worship, obtaining closeness to Allah Ta'ala. طيب. Any comments? So that I can hear more of your voices and less of my voice. Because I hear my voice all the time. MashaAllah, very, very quiet audience, other than this other Shaykh at the front. Everyone else is dead silent. طيب. What's your name? Umar. Where are you from, Umar? Originally? Egypt, MashaAllah. Good. You were born here in Sweden? No. Okay. I'm not going to go into more details. We can go on forever otherwise. Maybe after the dars, inshallah. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, when describing the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam during Ramadan, he says, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أجود الناس. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was the most generous of people. وكان أجود ما يكون في رمضان. And he was most generous during Ramadan. حين يلقاه جبريل. When Jibreel meets him, like we said, Jibreel used to study the Quran with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam during Ramadan. So that shows that the Prophet ﷺ during Ramadan increased his standard. That means it is not fair to expect from ourselves or from other people to keep up the same standard in Ramadan, outside Ramadan. That's not realistic. That's not realistic. Even the Prophet ﷺ raised his level during Ramadan. And so it's normal. And that's why sometimes after Ramadan, immediately after Ramadan, a lot of people complain. You'll often see social media feeds, Facebook or Twitter, people complaining about the masajid. Maybe some of us are guilty of that also. You might take a photo of a masjid and say, look, astaghfirullah al-azim, the masjid's empty. After Ramadan, one day after Ramadan, 2 days after Ramadan, the masjid is empty. It's fine. It's not positive to complain about that. Because Ramadan is a month that pushes people. Allah has made it like that. Ramadan is not like every other month. If our standards drop so low after Ramadan that we are even missing things that are wajib, then we say that now there's a problem. And that's something we should be working on. But it's not a problem if our standards increase in Ramadan and we can't keep up the same standard for the rest of the year. And if we think we can keep up the same standard, 99% of us are going to be disappointed. We're going to lose hope. We're going to lose hope. One of the biggest things that cause a person to lose hope is when we have a bit of motivation, a bit of energy, a bit of fire in our bellies, as we say. We dive into things, we jump into things. Maybe first day of Ramadan, we read 6 ajza of Quran. And we think, mashallah, that was all right, that wasn't too hard. 6 ajza of Quran, alhamdulillah, I did that quite comfortably. And we expect that we can do that for the rest of the month. And then when after 1 week we can't do that, we say, look, I'm a failure, I'm a munafiq. Maybe even some of us, I'm a hypocrite. No, that's just because we have done things in a disproportional way. We've done things in an unrealistic way. Unrealistic way. And in the upcoming lecture, inshallah ta'ala, maybe we'll touch upon the concept of ease and being wise in the way we worship. But very briefly, Ramadan is no exception to that rule. Okay, it's Ramadan, but it's better for us to be consistent during Ramadan than to dive in and then find ourselves unable to continue this standard of worship for the rest of the month. Everyone's different. Your friend can do 5 ajza a day, you can't do it, so don't do it. Read 1 juz a day. Read 1 juz a day. It's not the end of the world. The main thing is that every person does something that is suitable for them. Everyone's heart is different, everyone's ability is different, everyone has different aims, everyone has different objectives. No problem at all. طيب. How long do we have roughly? طيب. Jazakallah khair. I'm just going to briefly end. Now, hands up here if you are a student. Looks like most of you here, mashallah, students. Okay. Hands up if you're university students. Okay. Hands up if you are not yet a university student, but you are, I don't know what you have here before university. We have A-levels, college, A-levels. Okay. Sometimes when we are so busy, do you have exams this period of time? So during Ramadan you're going to have exams, yeah? Okay. Yeah, we also have that problem in the UK. A lot of students at university and before university as well have upcoming exams. And I teach religious studies at a secondary school, and I'm also stressing with the upcoming religious studies exams that the students have during Ramadan. Sometimes when we have these things, when we have exams, when we have studies, or we have work, we might think that we are losing out on Ramadan. Oh man, everyone else is attending Taraweeh, everyone else is reading so much Quran, everyone else is doing this, and I'm sitting here studying biology and chemistry and physics and law or maths or philosophy or whatever you're studying. And we might think that Ramadan's gone to waste. No, Ramadan hasn't gone to waste. Ramadan hasn't gone to waste. This is our duty right now. Right now, our task is to study, for instance. Right now, you as an individual, you have exams. You have upcoming exams. That's part of what you're supposed to be doing. That's part of what Allah Ta'ala wants from you. That's a key thing to keep in mind. When we're studying, inshallah, with positive intentions. When we're working with positive intentions. I work to provide for myself, to provide for my family, to ensure that my income is halal. I study to ensure that I can advance myself further and further and further, contribute something positive. Are these good intentions or not? They're excellent intentions. So are they part of what Allah wants from us or not? It's part of what Allah wants from us. So will our reward be multiplied, inshallah, during the month of Ramadan, if we have these positive intentions when studying or revising, performing an exam or not? Yes, they will be. And what we said earlier about taqwa and consciousness of Allah during fasting, there's no reason why we cannot continue that during work. For example, I say to myself, I'm not willing to do well in my exam if I have to cheat. So therefore, I'm going to make sure that during my exams, I'm going to do things properly and I'm not going to cheat. Because Allah Ta'ala doesn't want us to cheat. وَمَنْ غَشَّنَا فَلَيْسَ مِنَّا. The one who cheats us isn't from us. So as I'm studying and as I'm conscious about being fair in my exam, am I not inculcating the concept of taqwa into myself during Ramadan? Am I not living the month of Ramadan? Am I not living the month of taqwa? Am I not living the month of awareness of God as I'm studying, as I'm doing my exams, as I'm working? Yes. We have to move away from thinking that worship is just certain actions. Zikr, reciting the Quran, and salah in the masjid. And that's it. Everything else is dunya and is evil. الدنيا ملعونة ما فيها. That's not how this is supposed to be understood. That's not how it's supposed to be understood. This is part of our dunya and it's part of our akhirah. So therefore, during studies, keep these intentions in mind. During exams, keep these intentions in mind. These are means in order to achieve something that is positive, something that's good. And so if it happens that we have to do these things in Ramadan, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, you're not missing out any less. You're not missing out any less than the person who is reciting the Quran or making dhikr. Just as they are struggling to worship Allah, you're also struggling to worship Allah. I think the time seems to be up, and so we'll leave it at that. We'll take the brother's comment and then we'll end it there. I said you can't. I'm not saying don't try. I'm saying we have to be reasonable. What can we do to keep the same standard? I'm saying we can't keep the same standard. We're not going to keep the same standard. That's reality, because even the Prophet raised his standards in Ramadan. But all of us have a minimum. Everyone here has a minimum that they do. Some of us, maybe our minimum is 5 daily prayers. Sunnah prayers, sometimes we might pray, sometimes we might not pray, sometimes. Other people, maybe your minimum is fard and sunnah prayers and fasting 3 days a month. Maybe some of you are like that. No matter what happens, you will never miss your fard, you will never miss your sunnah, and you will never miss 3 fasts of Ramadan. So if that's your minimum, then after Ramadan, you try to raise the minimum a little bit. You raise the minimum according to what's your level. So during Ramadan, you're praying Qiyam al-Layl, you're praying Taraweeh, you're doing this, you're fasting every day. After Ramadan, you're not going to fast every day. After Ramadan, you might not pray Qiyam al-Layl every single day, but try to drop to a level, if you do drop, and you will drop to a level that is slightly above how you were before Ramadan. That's it. And every person is different. Every person is different. Some of us maybe are sometimes late for our prayers. Ramadan comes, I hope that we're going to be consistent with our prayers. After Ramadan, what's the minimum that we have to keep? Now we have to raise that standard a little bit and ensure that we are always consistent with our prayers. Every person is different. Every individual is different. And that's how to sort of look at it. Hopefully that's... it's up to your own individual level. Your own individual level, try to raise it a little bit, and a little bit. And if you drop, that's not a problem, but don't drop below the minimum. That's the only thing. The brother wants to end, but... no. How do you keep things sincere? Yeah. Sincerity, of course, isn't an easy thing. Because anytime we do something, especially if we do it publicly in front of others, there's always a potential risk of insincerity. But we shouldn't be paranoid of past actions. Past actions are done, say Alhamdulillah, may Allah accept. Assalamu alaikum. And we don't want to stress over past things. But long term, to develop ikhlas, there is no better way. And I say this with 100% certainty, and many of the scholars rahimahumullah ta'ala emphasize this point. There is no better way to have good ikhlas and strong ikhlas than to do private acts of worship, private deeds. Private, nobody knows about it. Don't post about it on Facebook, don't post about it on Instagram, don't tell your friends. Private deeds, if we are doing one private deed that nobody knows about, that develops in us a strength to be sincere. And if we continuously are consistently doing private deeds, even just one private deed, you can choose one private deed that you think you can do privately, nobody knows about. If we become consistent with that private deed, soon, by the will of Allah, even our public deeds become private, become sincere. Because we've filled our hearts with ikhlas, we've strengthened our ikhlas. But if our public actions are, mashallah, tabarakallah, and our private actions are very weak, then it's very difficult to turn public actions into sincere actions. Very difficult. One of our shuyukh says to us, everything you do in public, forget about it. And he says, when you do lectures like these, forget about it. When you write something, forget about it. It doesn't mean that it's useless, but he's saying don't rely on that. Because it's public. If something is public, there is always a risk of sincerity being impacted. But when something is private, that risk is gone. I'm confident that a private action is sincere. And the stronger I am with private actions, slowly, even my public actions, inshallah, will become more and more and more sincere. That's the best thing that I could say. Wallahu ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum. Subhanakallahu wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.